to start without my approval. Okay, so welcome everybody. I'm Alan Burkett-Gray. I'm Secretary of Greenwich Industrial History Society. I'm really pleased that this next, goodness, we've all been doing this for nearly 2 years. Today's talk is about pictures of Greenwich and Docklands, and it's by Peter Marshall, who's a photographer and lots of other things as well. So I'm going to hand over to Peter and say, can you say who you are? Mary Mills, who is our co-chair, I think at the end of this, if I'm going to ask her to say a bit about what we've got coming up next, because she's been really working hard and got bookings of speakers right through till next year, right through to the middle of 2023 is next year, isn't it? Yes, goodness me. So we're talking about lots of things that we might be doing in the future, and including Elizabeth Wiggins, who's on the 19th of July, and she's the archivist for Malden College, which is that amazing institution. Sorry?
I was going to say the September one. Peter Gilroy is not going. I'm not going to do it. We've got Stuart and Bill Burns doing something at Cable and Wireless.
Excellent. And that just shows what you can do virtually, because Stuart's in Beckenham and Bill Burns is in sort of outer New York somewhere. So, you can do these sort of things remotely, virtually, thanks to our modern technology. You don't all have to come to the Blackheath Bakehouse or whatever for the event. So I'm going to shut up. I'm going to say, Peter, can you say a bit about who you are?
Right.
You're a fellow NUJ member, I'm glad to see. I've been an NUJ member for 49 years in September. So
right. I've not been a member of the NUJ for that long. I'm also a member of the NUT because I taught for about 30 years before sort of going into journalism and photography full time.
The NUJ, I should say, is National Union of Journalists, and
it's the it's now the NEU, actually. I should remember that. Well, I hope everybody can hear me okay. I'm going to start off by saying that I'm not really an industrial archaeologist, although I've belonged to GLIAS for many years and been to a number of its events.
I think we tend to say GLIAS.
Well, we could argue about that one, couldn't we? I think people always do. And I've known Mary for some time and been with her on a tour of Greenwich once, at least once. But I'm not going to sort of give you an awful lot of stuff about the industrial history, just largely show you the photographs today. And these photographs come from 5 self-published books that go along I'm not sure we'll get to the end, but they go along the banks of the Thames from Southwark out to pretty well the Medway, somewhere Grain, I think. I finish. And rather than look at me, I'm going to share my screen so that you can see something a bit more interesting. And you are now screen sharing. Good. And I think I didn't mean to do that.
Excellent. Well done. You've screen shared faster than anyone else in the history of our online talks. Well done.
Let's start with this one because everybody will recognize where this is with the Oxo Tower there. And this is from the 1970s, late 1970s. And I first went to photograph this sort of aspect of London back in 1978. And one of my friends took me with a couple of other photographers for a walk around Southwark. And this is where we start here. The Oxo Tower and its building had a banner across the front that says Donald Cook, packers of finest canned foods. And the Oxo Tower wharf had previously belonged to the post office when it was acquired by the Liebig Extract of Meat Company And the Art Deco tower with that famous OXO on it was put there because they weren't allowed to put up advertising. The building was actually saved shortly after I took these pictures by the Coin Street community builders who refurbished it in the 1990s. So that's still there. The building beyond that is Sea Containers House, a fairly ugly building by an American modernist architect. And at right, we have something that all photographers will, or many photographers will recognize, which used to be the home of amateur photographer, King's Reach Tower, it was called then. And their idea of lens testing was to poke a lens out the window and take a picture of the ship on the opposite bank of the Thames. But most of this...
Well, and I've actually been up to the top of King's Reach Tower.
Yeah.
Just interviewed the new scientist.
Oh, right. But most of this building, most of this area was actually owned by the Union Cold Stores, and that's at the left of this picture. And there we see another one of their building. Most of the pictures I'll show were taken on land, but these bits you couldn't really have access to by land, and they're taken from one of the boats that goes along with tourists. And was I going to say something about this? Yes. The Union Cold Stores belonged to were a company set up by the Vestey brothers. William Vestey, 1859 to 1940, and his brother Edmund Hoyle Vestey, 1866 to 1954, who came from Liverpool. And they imported surplus meat from Chicago in corned beef cans. They were probably the first people to realize and exploit the potential of refrigerated vessels to bring meat and eggs across the world. And they set up Union Cold Storage, which is here, in 1897, and they had their own large Blue Star fleet of ships, and it grew rapidly over during the First World War. And they set up branches and freezing works in Australia, Brazil, Venezuela, Argentina. And they were also pioneers, not just in refrigeration, but also in tax dodging. And during the First World War, when taxes were introduced to support the war, they moved their business to Argentina, so they didn't have to pay taxes, the extra taxes. And they later got into trouble because they ran their company from Paris, again to avoid paying taxes, and through some sort of dodge that eventually they were stopped from doing. The Vestey name, Vesteys became the richest family in the country apart from the royals through their business. And although few of us have heard of Vesteys, most of us, certainly unless we're very young, will remember a chain of butchers called Dewhursts, and they had over 1,000 branches through the country. Also a number of other quite well-known business names. So we've looked at that one for far too long. Another one. Oh, sorry about that. Just drag it down. And this is not on a Vestey building, but this was an advert for OXO seen from Southwark Bridge Road. And it's actually on a very different company whose name I've just, well, doesn't really matter. Oh, and on the right is the Eldorado Ice Cream Limited, which was a Vestey company, and they made a minor company. They went out of business, I think, in the 50s, or they were active 1925 to 60. I'm not sure I ever tried El Dorado ice cream. Here are some of the buildings around there, Stamford Wharf there at the back there. On Southwark Bridge Road, there was this lovely chimney for Gray and Martin, who were, as it says, the city lead mills. And they were still in business when I took this, I think in 1978. I'm not sure quite what they were doing there, but they made lead containers, protective lead sheeting for medical X-ray and radioactive equipment and so on. Sennett Brothers was just a little bit in where next to Tate Modern there, their Castle Yard factory. And one of the big industries that used to be around in Southwark was the fur trade. And they were hatters, furriers, and skin merchants. Clink Wharf, I suspect it was later turned into a popular and gory tourist attraction, which I don't think I ever went to, nor did I take those wind and digestive pills. But that, you know, is a poster that I think was put up later than that. Going along there, past from Clink Street, you've got the Propeller Group, New British Wharf, and Baker Britt, who export packing warehouses. They're still there. They've been considerably smartened up since I took these pictures. And this section of railway arches, I think this is Story Street, if memory serves me right. And I can get the captions actually. Yeah, Stony Street, sorry about that. Taken in 1981. And this, I think, is being done up at the moment quite considerably. Clink Street looks a bit different now. But Baker Britt, I think, still looks much the same, although rather fewer broken windows than when I photographed it. And you've got this whole lot of sort of warehouses around this area, Cathedral Street and St Mary Overy Wharf here, some of which are still there, most of which have been tidied up. And there's a very good Glias article in 1983 published about all the warehouses in this area. Everything I know about them pretty well comes from that article, which you can find online if you want to know more. But Clink Street had all these overhead bridges like we're more familiar with, I think, now from Shad Thames, which we'll get to later. And on the right at Clink Street, you can see at the end, the wall at the bottom is around the St Mary Overy Wharf, which I think still has a label on it that tells you, what's it say? That it is a free landing place at which the parishioners of St Saviour's Parish are entitled, oh, sorry, I got dismissal, are entitled to land goods free of toll. Well, that would be rather difficult for them to do so, as the dock is now occupied by that life-size replica of the Golden Hind. And this was supposed to be the where pilgrims ended when they were coming back from Canterbury along Watling Street with ferries to take them across the river to Dowgate. Another picture of the same sort of place. And this is the actual dock, St Mary Overy dock, and looking across to the city. From the river.
Oh, and that horrible beast Mondial House, which BT had as an
yeah, it's an interesting building. Yeah, it is. I think a few of the others in this picture have gone as well.
And where I went into Mondial House just as it was about to be demolished, so it was really empty of anything. Yeah. This is Pickford's Wharf and the dock there.
from the river. And that's looking down the dock. A couple of years later, when they started putting up this new building next to it. Cole and Carey, I think, took over the building in 1890. I think these buildings were mainly from the sort of 1870s, 1880s. And they were just general wharfingers. Some of these buildings were still in use when I first photographed them as warehouse storage, but most were empty and becoming rather derelict. And a little bit further along, this says St Mary Overy Wharf. I think it might actually not be that, but the next bit along, whose name I have at the moment forgotten, but it's on a bit of paper somewhere. And no, it's gone. And these were all being demolished all the way up pretty well to London Bridge. Well, you've got Mondale House in the background of that, as well as the railway station. So there they were coming down in 1979. It's a shame that rather more of them weren't retained, and there we see London Bridge. On the other side of London Bridge, we come to Hayes Wharf, and they're best known of their buildings on the right here, this 1930s building. I've forgotten the architect. Hang on. Sorry, my memory is going. And Hayes Wharf were a sort of ancient, quite an ancient company, started by Francis Theodore Hay. Started in 1651 when Alexander Hay brought a gallery somewhere in this area and turned it into a brewing and warehousing company, and very much to do with Bermondsey's tanning industry. So dealing with tallow, fats and hides in the warehouse. And the whole business expanded hugely as London became a centre of world trade. And we'll see some more of Hayes Wharf in a minute. Chamberlain's Wharf, it's rather a nice building. They're both still there, of course, these two. And it dates from, I think, 1862. And this was a sufferance wharf, allowed to handle some dutiable goods. And it became part of Hayes Wharf in the early 20th century, continued in work until 1969, when it became a private hospital, which it is now. Still, it's the back of that Hayes Wharf building. What we generally think of as Hayes Wharf now is just a little bit part of their huge empire in Bermondsey. And this was built around a small tidal creek, which was actually known as Pipe Borers Creek. And by then, the business was owned by Alderman John Humphrey Jr., and he commissioned William Cubitt to build this small dock here with these 5 stories, warehouses on both sides. And so that was 1856. Unfortunately, it all burnt down in 1861 when they had a great fire of Tooley Street. So it had to be built up again. And it was built up by a new company, the proprietors of Hayes Wharf, who I think continued to own much of the property in this area until the 1969. English Ground, this is where the Southwark Crown Court was built. Hayes Wharf, here we've got a rather plainer bit of Hayes Wharf. And this, I think, is probably post-war. There's quite an awful lot of bomb damage. And then this is another bit of Hayes Wharf there. And one of my favourite buildings in the area, as you'll see in a moment, with these cantilevered out balconies. So there it is again, and again, and again, and again. It was actually very limited in the access that there was to the riverside then. You know, you can walk along there now, but that wasn't possible. There were just a few points where you could actually access the river, and one of them was at the east side of that building. So that's a view upstream from Tower Bridge. Some things are still there, though you can't necessarily see all of them because of the buildings in between. And the downstream view with Butler's Wharf at the right-hand side, the small white building in the middle, I'll say a little bit more about later. Immediately next to Tower Bridge, as you can see here, we've got the Anchor Brew House. And it's very well known, I won't say anything more about that. And you've also got the start of Butler's Wharf. And if you compare what Butler's Wharf looks like then with what it looks like now, I think it is rather different. And Butler's Wharf, I think at this time, quite a large bit of it was sort of semi-legally occupied by artist studios. And they had a fire there, and after that, the authorities tightened up on the use of that, and many artists had to move out. And one of my friends, an artist who had been in there, got on his bike and cycled across the Tower Bridge and cycled north, and ended up in Shoreditch when his bicycle got a puncture. And he knocked on saw a person in a nearby building and said, "Oh, can I have a bucket of water so I can test where this puncture is in my bicycle tire?" And they got chatting, and he got new studios in Shoreditch. And this was actually the start of a big movement to put artist studios into many old industrial buildings around London. And I think groups like Acme is one of them. Quite a lot of those groups came from this fire in Butler's Wharf. But the real jewel of Bermondsey for me, certainly, was Shad Thames. And here are a few pictures of Shad Thames, which of course has been restored into something which I think is more a pastiche. The buildings have been more or less kept, they've been tidied up. All of these overhead bridges between the warehouses on the left of these pictures, which were fronting the Thames and across the street to the warehouses on the other side. I think all of these are now virtually identical. It's lost to me nearly all of the charm that it once had, and which interested me as a photographer. Yeah, all these shapes and light and dark. Crown Wharf, again, has been rebuilt behind the facade, I think probably is the best way to speak about many of these things here. They look vaguely the same, except very much tidier, and but behind that, I think they're different. And you could see across the river at various places. So there we got Wapping across the river. Don't know anything about this ship. And here we're looking from Shad Thames across St Saviour's Creek to some of the warehouses on the other side. The wall across the middle of this picture has actually got a drop down to the water. And at the end of Shad Thames, on the corner of Queen Elizabeth Street, was Joe Edwards' snack bar. Bermondsey was known as London's larder, and the mass of men and rather fewer women who worked there. To keep that larder stocked themselves needed sustenance, and Joe Edwards' snack bar was there to provide it. Around the corner from Joe Edwards' snack bar, you do come to St Saviour's Dock. This is actually the view from the Thames end of St Saviour's Dock. And it's a little bit different now, but it's still quite impressive. And as I've said before, these are all tidied up. And there is one quite attractive modern building has replaced, I think, the sort of blocky one on the right-hand side. But you couldn't walk across here. There wasn't a bridge. You couldn't walk down by the creek here. It's another view of it, and it's mouthed into the Thames. And this is the view from the other end, from Dockhead. Quite sizable craft used to come up here to one of the mills on the right-hand side. There's a fairly small boat moored in that one, but later on I did photograph it with some quite large vessels, a quite large vessel. So this is from Dockhead, and Vogan's on the right was a mill there. I think Spillers was sort of at the end into Bermondsey Mill. Vogan's, quite a nice concrete silo, rather plain, was actually built in 1955 and is now expensive flats. And many of the other buildings around here have also been converted to that use. Spillers was just demolished, I think. Biscuits, Pete Freens were here. They moved out, they've been in, this is Mill Street. Sorry, this is actually Jacob Street, which runs off Mill Street. Pete Freens had been in Mill Street around 1858, and they developed biscuits such as the Garibaldi and Bourbon in Mill Street. Just named because they were popular sort of things in the news at the time. No real connection with either Bourbons or Garibaldi. And Jacobs move into Jacob Street. I think it was called Jacob Street before they moved in. And their factory here had separate doors for workers and the office. And they were exactly the same size, I think. It's just that I framed them differently. Back on Mill Street, you've got Unity Wharf still there, and Tower Finishers is still there. Going on to Bermondsey Wall, and by the time that I got there in 1983, most of the buildings by the Thames had been demolished, and now you've got blocks of flats there. The white building here is St Saviour's House, and that is still there. And St Saviour's House is where Bermondsey Wall meets George Row. And George Row was actually the main route of the River Neckinger, which went into the Thames here. And the monks who of Bermondsey Abbey actually had a tide mill here. And Jacob's Island is the area that is sort of on the right of this picture here. Was between the main Neckinger and St Saviour's Dock and a side street, and it had canals into which they let the water every 2 or 3 days at high tide, and then let it run out to power their tide mill. These tidal canals apparently held enough water to run the mill for a few days, except of course at high tide. And the area between these, which was one of London's worst slums, was Jacob's Island, and it was actually an island because of these canals, and of course is featured in Dickens's Oliver Twist's Where Fagin Has His Den. It's another view from Bermondsey Wall of Wapping. And it was about the time that the old warehouses at Wapping were starting to be converted into flats as well. Bermondsey Wall here is where I'm going to just move to another set of pictures. So these sets of pictures that I'm showing, as I say, are actually books which I put on, are still actually available through Blurb, but silly expensive because it's print on demand. And this is one of the rolling bascule bridges, which were patented, I think, in the 1880s by an American called Schertzer. And you'll see also here the gas holder, which is, I think, still there, though not sure how much longer. Let's move on. So that's Rotherhithe from the river, and church there. And if I wasn't, there is a film studios there, which I shows films about every Tuesday night. Globe Stairs, and of course the Rotherhithe Tunnel. And you can see here you could then walk down the steps, and if you wanted, you could go right down to the bottom, you could go into the tunnel and walk across the river, although I think you might well find it not a very good atmosphere despite these large fans which were ventilating it. Now it's all locked up, I think, the last time I went, well, for a long time when I've been there. In the river, you've got a dolphin near the entrance to the Surrey docks in the river, and that's the ventilator shaft. And the gas holder. And after the gasworks closed, I'm not sure I dare say anything about gasworks with Mary here, but the Rotherhithe gasworks were built on the site of a whale oil company, and the South Metropolitan Gas Company took over the site in 1879 and built themselves a new iron jetty, which we'll see in a later picture. And colliers used to bring coal from Newcastle, and there was a bridge across that you'll see in a minute to the gasworks. But as well as bringing in coal for this gasworks, they also put coal into lighters here, which then went up the Surrey Canal to the old Kent Road gasworks. The dolphin again. And again. Oh, Globe Wharf. And this is the Clarence Jetty, which was the gasworks jetty, with, you can see the bridge across, which goes across Rotherhithe Street and then went to the gasworks site. Surrey docks were largely docks for timber, but here's a wharf actually on the bank of the Thames, and this is Duran's Wharf, said to have closed in 1975, but I took these pictures in 1984 and I think it was still working, although probably not on the day, that Sunday that I took these pictures. Going on to the Greenland dock entrance and looking across the river to the Barkentine estate on the Isle of Docks with those 4 tower blocks. This is South Dock entrance. I don't know why I've put them in this order. And at the right of the South Dock entrance, which we'll see in a moment, the woman riding a bicycle to it, was the original site of Surrey Docks Farm, which was formed in 1975. And I first visited this cycling from Staines, about 30 miles and back each way, together with my then 8-month pregnant wife, wondering if the exertion might precipitate a slightly early delivery en route, but fortunately not. The farm later moved from this entrance to a new site, I think about 1/4 of a mile to the north. So that's Surrey Docks Farm in one of the old dock buildings. And there you can see some rather fine examples of council housing on the Isle of Dogs across the river. Yeah, and some goats and I think sheep. On Rotherhithe Street, back to the bridge, there are 2 bridges leading into Rotherhithe, one at each side of the Surrey Docks, both of this type. They're both still either in the same position or quite close. The one at the south has moved a little way. Neither of them working, neither of them capable of working. The shipbuilding or ship repair company there, and some containers. This was about the time that the London LDDC, the London Docklands Development Corporation, took over the area from Southwark Council, who had already started to redevelop the area, rather more than I think the councils north of the river. And this made the whole thing very, well, chaos, I think is the kindest word to say. But many of the council properties Southwark, I think, had already moved people out of so that they could redevelop them. Rather nice garden on Rotherhithe Street, which I did talk to the people who lived there, but I couldn't quite understand some of the things they told me about it. But a lot of the area was pretty derelict, pretty empty. And then you've got some new housing at the back here. And that's the Amos Estate Council housing. Empty shops. A lot of boarded up property. And a lot of squatting. And I talked to the woman who hung out her washing here. And, you know, we need a home, don't wreck it. But these are now redone, I think, quite expensive properties. Nelson Dock on Rotherhithe Street, now part of a hotel, I think. Globe Wharf, which was Thames rice milling. And then South Dock, and looking along South Dock with these warehouses on the left here, I think are probably after the Second War. And there they are from the other side, Plough Way. Not particularly pretty buildings, I suppose, but very functional, I think. And all demolished. Going on, you had St. George's Wharf. And around there, another, I think this is still there, this particular one. But I did think that, you know, maybe these could have been reused rather than knocked down, converted into flats, you know. The interior of the Surrey Docks was just such a mess. It was very difficult to know actually where you were. You know, the maps didn't make much sense at that time. and huge areas like this. You can actually locate it by the tower blocks there. And some of the bits of dock wall were kept, and some bits of it are listed. That's Greenland Dock. And this is the dockers' shelter on Redriff Road, where men used to go, because every morning, early morning, dock work was largely casual labour, and they would go there for the call on, where the gang leaders would come and choose the people they wanted to work with them. And before the 1899 Great Dock Strike, people might be taken on for as little as half an hour at a time. And at 5p an hour, 5 old pence an hour, they would get paid 2.5 old pence for that. Even allowing for inflation, I think that's about £1. So not exactly enough to feed a family on. There is now quite a good interpretation board at this site, put there in the early 90s. And the last time I went there, this was actually being used by homeless people to sleep in. It's Russia Dock. And this, I think, is a listed capstan. There, some of the dock sheds still, which have gone. And these were open sheds for the timber. But it was a mess. It was a mess. Right. I'm going to go to the next book. And I'm conscious that I'm going rather slowly, so I shall go through this rather faster. Partly because I know there are people listening who know far more about any of this than me. So from the Riverside Path, looking back at Greenwich, the river curves around. Pepys Estate in Deptford. This is part of the route of the Surrey Canal from in Deptford. And of course, the Royal Victoria Victualling Yard. And on a Glias trip, we got taken down into the rum store, but we weren't offered any rum. And this is now Pepys Park. Very odd. And we went into what's now called Convoy's Wharf. And there I'm looking back at the Deptford Riverside from Pepys Estate, from their jetty. And there are the cranes and a roll-on, roll-off ship at the jetty. We'll come back to another one. And these incredible grade 2, well, they're certainly listed. I forget which grade they are. Grade 2 listed Olympia warehouses. And they are huge. And I think the two people standing there, who I don't recognize, give you some idea. And they were being used for storing newsprint for Times newspapers. And we were able to sort of go inside and see that taking place from with a Convoy's Wharf lorry. And there you see some of the steel structure. And these were it was a roll-off, roll-on ship, rather ironically named Laurentian Forest. And at the end of this site, next to Watergate Street, is the Master Shipwright's house, again listed. And it's difficult to see, except from the other side of the river now. It's its doorway. Yes, there we have Laurentian Forest. Payne's Wharf was a boiler making factory. marine boiler factory, and I think dates from about the 1880s. And the engine of the world's first ironclad HMS Warrior was fitted here, and also engines of early dreadnought battleships. But they stopped production in 1911. I'm told it was later used for paper, and it's usually called Payne's Paper Wharf, although as you see on the picture, it's just called Payne's Wharf. And again, a better view of it from Convoy's Wharf jetty, and some Glias members in the at the right there. And you go down on the foreshore, the steps there, and this is the view, Lower Watergate. And if you look to the north, you see the jetty for Deptford Power Station. The view through it, I think that's Burrell's Wharf on the Isle of Dogs. And the front of that Payne's Wharf building was occupied by an egg processing company, and they broke eggs, imported eggs from China for 40 years, and they broke about 300,000 of them a day by hand, which were frozen and sold in bulk to the catering trade. And if you look on YouTube, you can find a clip from the film The London Nobody Knows, where James Mason goes into that factory and talks with some of the women. It's a film based on the book by Geoffrey Fletcher, though I don't think, The London Nobody Knows, though he didn't put a picture of this in his book or mention it at all. Albury Street is worth a walk down, not the bit shown here, nor the garden. Stowage was a quite incredible street in Deptford, and Stowage is actually the street that the power station was built just to the north of. And when I went down, it was occupied by all sorts of metal bashing industries, really. And I wrote more or less at the time, it was the kind of street you wondered if it was safe to walk down, and certainly if it was safe to take photographs. Businesses like some of the ones here were busy recycling the detritus of our industrial civilization. And there are often fires with black smoke and groups of men at work who made clear they didn't want to be photographed. It seemed a small area of the underbelly, a glimpse of hell, and I hurried through, stopping just to take a few pictures. Well, I did go through there several times and take a few pictures. So this is Stowage. And towards the Deptford Creek end, there are all these scrap yards of various sorts, Parker Metals, and there's the power station. Deptford was the site of the first sort of industrial scale power station built by designed by Sebastian Ferranti. And it was the first one to use AC power so that it could be transmitted to their properties in the centre of London that used electricity. And Ferranti set it up as an 11 kilovolt line. And apparently it's the reason why all the power lines since have been in multiples of 11,000 volts. Ferranti obviously didn't get everything right because they gave him the boot 2 years afterwards and rebuilt quite a few things. That station actually, I think, stayed there until the 1930s or 40s, but this one was built in 1953 and fairly spectacularly demolished in the early 1990s. It was decommissioned in 83. So I did take some pictures with smoke coming out of the chimney. Parker Metals there, next to the Deptford Creek, Crown Wharf. And there's a picture of, by someone else, of this Crown Wharf, then under different management, on the latest, one of the recent Glias in London's industrial archaeology in colour. On the other side, when I photographed it, it was an aggregate works. Before that, there had been a gasworks on that site. On the Greenwich side of the creek here, we got more scrap metal, Dow's Wharf, and a nice bit of 1930s council housing. This is the picture I sent by accident to publicise this. Some of you may recognise that it's actually taken from the train to get this view, just coming out of Greenwich Station on the riverfront. And this is another scrapyard that you could walk underneath, and that one they had this thing to protect you. And that is my wife and her brother, actually. And then we get to the Riverside Path proper, going up here. A very different picture now. Almost everything, I think everything there is now gone. Start of that was Lovell's Wharf or Lovell's Wharf. And there's the path that led down to it. And this is the view downriver again. Well, yes, love. I felt sorry for the poor guy who had to shift all this stuff with just a fork, even though it has got a lot of prongs. And there's a spade up there as well, you know, rather a lot to do. Piper's Wharf, and the boat Luminance moored there, I think did do some cable laying for Enderby's, who were just along from there. But later in its life, it became somewhat more notorious. Had a number of name changes, and in 2011, it was called Green Cedar, and it was seized off the coast of Spain by customs there, who found over 15 tons of hashish on board. Piper's Wharf was where many of the well-known Thames racing barges were actually built. And that's the cable laying, Enderby's cable laying ship, the John W. Mackay. And that came to a rather unfortunate end. It was built on the Tyne, sorry, I've lost my place, in 1922, and laid cables around the world, appeared in the James Bond movie, and was the oldest triple expansion steam vessel on Lloyd's Register. But there were plans made for preservation that never came to fruition, and the ship was broken up in Turkey in 1994. Going further, and there's another one of it, and on Enderby's jetty. Then we got Morden Wharf and the silos of the oil company there, which I like photographing. And there is a jetty you can sort of go out legally on now, but I think this was actually closed to the public. Across the river, you've got Millwall Wharf there, replaced, of course, by housing now. Horseshoe Breach, and looking back towards gas holders from there. And the path that led to the Blackwall Tunnel approach, again, Horseshoe Breach. And Victoria Deepwater Terminal. And this was a private terminal, container terminal, opened in 1966 and continued in use as a container terminal, I think, into the 1990s. And it had a public footpath going through the middle. The two lines that you can see there show you where the footpath was. It might seem better on the next picture. And I was once very politely asked if I would mind just waiting a minute or two while they shifted containers over the path, and thought it was probably wise to do so, just in case they dropped one. To go further by the river then, you had to go across the Blackwall Tunnel approach, and that's the back of, I think, Morden Wharf again. And that took you to a very pleasant pub called the Pilot, which I'm afraid to say in my estimation has since been ruined. Still a pub. And then you got out to the footpath that led you to, through New Charlton, past yet more scrap metal, Angerstein Wharf. I went there by train once, on one of these sort of special train journeys, but wasn't much opportunity to take pictures. Didn't actually take you right into the wharf. Again, view back towards Greenwich and the power station. A little bit further on, you get to Marion Park. Not sure I got these in quite the right order. And fans of the film Blow Up will recognize that. And there was this Thames barrier, which was relatively new then, and some kids throwing stones in the water. Plenty of those there. And you could walk all the way along to Woolwich, and this is just before I got to Woolwich. Cubal built ships. This is Mast Pond Wharf, yachts, fishing boats, up to about 1,000 tons until the year before I actually took this picture, 1983. And the site looks pretty derelict. It's now got a huge block of flats next to it. It was formerly part of the Royal Dockyard, founded in 1513, and it's Grade 2 listed, but didn't stop it being rather hidden by flats. And demolition was going on. I think this is the power station at Woolwich. Let me move to another book. I did take the odd picture in colour. And this is Thamesmead from the ruins of the Abbey. I'm going to go through these fairly quickly because I've been talking too much. And Thamesmead was built on the floodplain in the old, what had been parts of Woolwich Arsenal site, parts of it, and on marshes. So this footpath is elevated, not just to save you having to go up and down, but it was an escape route, built as an escape route by the planners. And there it goes over one of the roads. And these blocks on Maron Way here, the lower floor, again, because it's on the floodplain, is garages and the housing is above. Southmere, fans of Clockwork Orange will know that part of it was filmed on the other side of the lake here. More of that footpath. And some of the sort of, they called tumps on that where they stored explosives and so on have been sort of kept in some way or remade really, I think, in the main as play areas on Thamesmead. And they got cannons. I couldn't work out for a little while what these structures were around the end, but they're to stop people crawling along them and dropping off at the end. And of course, London's rubbish being taken past and the road in flood barrier in the distance. boat-shaped shelters, crossness. That pylon is one of the ones I think near Ford. And this is the where water from the marshes goes out into the river, and I think that's a bit of Ford works in the distance across the river. And I wondered what these white cliffs were for some time. And oh, this is Belvedere Power Station seen over them. And these were the spoil, the waste from the borax refinery that was here for many years. It was opened in 1899 and kept working until 1988. And they just made these huge heaps, all of which have now been taken away. Belvedere and the factory has gone, and the power station is gone. River Wharf has gone. Belvedere is still an interesting walk by the river from Erith to Belvedere and further on, but you won't find these places anymore. Not sure what I think these cans might contain newsprint. I'm not sure. I mean, it's obviously aggregate here. But this is huge building here, sort of like a corrugated iron cathedral or something, nave. This jetty is for the oil works at Erith. It was British Oil and Cape Mills, and is now ADM Erith, but it's still there. And part of it is grade 2 listed, but not the silos. One of the old jetties. Another picture of it. So coming into Erith. And that is the Erith Oil Works. The river curves round so you get a good view of it. A very long jetty. On the other side of Erith, you have these sheds, and again, I think this is newsprint in them. And concrete some sort. And sort of saltings here that in Anchor Bay that sort of used for moorings. That's my son. No, I didn't pose him, he just ran up there. Wasn't sure what these sort of remains of fences were, whether they actually had some purpose or just was showing how the bank had changed. And this was when they were putting up new flood barriers by the Thames, and this is one of them at Crayford Ness. And the tower at left is where the light signal at Crayford Ness is. And there we have that, and the VHF. And a tax post. Looking across the river, lots of oil storage. The flood barrier. The nice flashing red light. It wasn't flashing. And the industrial area there, Darren Industrial Park. And I think that's possibly the mouth of the Cray there. And Howbury Moat, which is an ancient, bit of ancient history, a moated site. And the farmhouse, I think, is also listed. We got time for more? Hope so.
Yeah, have another few.
Yeah. So we go on to just a little bit of the cement industry, really, in North Kent at Swanscombe. And Peter Luck will know something about Swanscombe. Starting off at Dartford. And they've been doing a lot of work on the half lock on Dartford, so that boats can come up to Dartford again now. And this is the half lock that they've been restoring. Bit of a ship's graveyard at the time. And these are the fresh marshes, and there's also salt marshes. Littlebrook Power Station there, now gone. This is landfill on a quarry site at Stone. More landfill. And Littlebrook again. APCM has the Portland Cement Association of Portland Cement Manufacturers, I think, when they different companies joined together. But their site was nothing really left of it when I went to Stone, except, you know, things like this pond or lake and the trees that they'd planted. It's a view across the river from Stone. Greenhithe, and this again is quarrying. Empire Paper Mills by the river. And some bits not in use. Swanscombe. That still looks much the same, except there are no chimneys. I think the pub is closed now. The Skull site. Again, much of this landscape is created by quarrying, so you get these white cliffs and things like that. And this is the cement works at Swanscombe and rotary kilns. Again, Swanscombe. And Swanscombe, I think, was still theoretically working then. Well, there wasn't much happening. And again, the jetty is still there. Not sure if that particular bit of it is. And it's huge pylons there still. A lot of waste again, which I think is gone. And marsh, still there. And there you see the two pylons, one on each side of the river. And the view down from the road at the top of Botany Marshes is still there. Another view of it. Kentcraft. Northfleet. And this was still a working Blue Circle Cement Works, still very much working and very dusty. And the war memorial there was totally white, covered with cement dust. And the church and the roads on sort of fairly narrow bits of chalk that have been left by quarrying. And this is a footpath there that goes across between two bits that have been quarried. And a lake in one of the quarries, Sawyer's Lake. And the riverside, the shore. Big ships going into Tilbury. Northfleet Power Station, another one that's gone. AEI, no longer there, of course. Henleys were part of AEI, I think. That rather nice building here, I think, is still there. And then Rocherville and Gravesend. I think that's perhaps a good place to stop, although I could go on further. Okay, so perhaps I'll end there, and if people have any questions, I'll do my best to answer them.
Thank you. That was great, Peter, and so nostalgic. Did you say that some of you published these? I mean, they looked as though they were pages from the book.
Yeah, those what I've been using are actually the files that I uploaded to Blurb to sort of publish them, and they're still available on Blurb, but because it's publishing on demand.
On where?
Blurb, BLURB.
Oh, right.
URB, yeah, and they're very expensive as books, but you can download the file like the ones that I've been showing for a £5, I think. I don't get very much of that. Most of it goes to Blurb.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. Anybody got questions? I mean, we're a lot of comments through the talk. Oh yeah, Elizabeth Piercy says thanks for all those who paid their subscriptions. And Mary says she worked in Dorset House and Stamford Street for a photographer.
Oh right. Yeah.
Right. And the old barge house, which one was that where Brunel lived, Mary? You're muted. You're muted, Mary. Mary, you're muted.
Yeah. No, Brunel, IK Brunel was in the old barge house with his family.
Oh, right.
Where the tower is next to it was the Royal Barge House.
Elizabeth said there was archaeology under Mondale House, but just says very good. Elizabeth, you want to say what sort of archaeology they found it under Mondale House? Elizabeth Piercy, are you there? Hello,
yes, no, Richard pointed out, Richard Buchanan, 13th and 14th century wharves. It's been very well done and very well published by the Museum of London unit at the time. Very interesting. Interesting that the building of Mondale House didn't destroy as much archaeology as one feared.
So it's a long way down, isn't it? Some of it. I mean, if you've been to the Temple of Mithras, you go down so many steps to get to it.
Both banks of the Thames have been so settled. Very deep. In effect, you've got such build-up on top of the of those deposits.
Yeah. They've done a lot of Museum of London did a lot of archaeology around those Convoys Wharf Olympia sheds, didn't they? And
that in fact was done mostly by pre-construct archaeology.
Right, was it? Yeah.
Further upstream, of course, on the South Bank, the archaeology was covered by the Southwark unit, another very good archaeological unit.
Right.
So, specific questions on the archaeology, I need notice, but
I loved your pictures of stowage because I remember 40 years ago. Yeah, it must be 40 years ago. Yeah. I was looking. I was living in a flat in Brixton, and I was looking to move to this part of the world. I went to see somewhere around stowage, and it was still a metal bashing place. And I remember going down one November evening at about 7 o'clock, and it was dark, and it was just really something from a different world.
Absolutely.
I mean, the whole area was full of that, and now, of course, it's just one street that goes between blocks of flats.
Well, houses and flats.
Come in there a second. One is, as I put in the chat, my article, which should come out tomorrow, is actually about stowage.
Yeah.
But, can I pick you up on something you maybe don't know about, Peter? When you said about Payne's Wharf.
Yeah.
The shipwright's house was sold, of course, to two young men, Chris and Will, who've done a vast amount of research on the area. And they think, and I'm sure they're right, that Payne's Wharf, that arcaded frontage, was built by the railway company
Right.
Possibly by Cubitt or by George Landman as a ferry and rail interchange, which never.
Right. Yeah.
And they just built that.
The London Grange Railway, you mean?
It's not called that, but it's them, yes. But they're called something I can't remember. Something the Deptford Extension, something like that. Chris really did all the research on it.
Yeah. Oh, that's interesting. I mean, that building is just a front and a back, isn't it? And everything in between those two is new there.
Right.
I watched those flats being built because I used to cycle into work in the city from Blackheath, and I used to go along the path. So a lot of what you've just shown in your pictures, I've cycled along, and that building is still there. I mean, as you say, the outside of it's still there.
Yeah.
Exhibition places in there as well. I mean,
it's listed. Of course.
So, Mary?
It's listed, of course.
Is it? Yeah.
Mm.
And there's so much else that's changed. I noticed this when you took that picture across the river from Woolwich, showing the wharf, and there were satellite dishes on the other side.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
The BT Earth Station for delivering cable TV channels.
Yeah.
And in fact, one of their customers was Greenwich Cablevision, who were based in Woolwich, just across the river. So the way that they got their channels, the early channels, was from North Woolwich to South Woolwich via a satellite 30,000 kilometers away. But because they were delivering to other parts of the country as well. Roland says, have you ever considered taking those views as they are today for comparison purposes?
It doesn't really interest me. I know a lot of people do this. I just sort of feel, well, you can just go on Street View these days.
Yes, yeah, okay.
Doesn't always work, I have to say.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Elizabeth says, yes, beautiful pictures. They were really good pictures. You obviously did them on film. It was before the digital era.
Oh, yeah.
So you were processing everything.
Yeah, I mean, that was all shot on 35mm film.
Yeah.
And I used mainly a 35mm shift lens, which enables you to sort of alter the, sort of straighten verticals. Not that I usually got them quite straight and this sort of thing. And it gives you a different sort of control to using a straightforward camera. It's an architectural sort of thing. Yeah. No. I was wondering if Peter Luck had seen the pictures of Swanscombe before, because I know we have an interest in that area.
Yeah. Peter, are you there still?
Yes, I hadn't seen your photographs.
Speak up a bit, Peter. Oh, there you are. You're very, very
muted.
All the top notes are gone.
Sorry, I missed what you just said. But yeah, I had not seen your photographs, Peter, of Swanscombe.
All right. Yeah.
And you fairly obviously you've filled in a few blanks.
Yeah.
It does occur to me, though, that there is a heck of a lot. You've increased the range of what one has seen, and in some cases of what one knows. But I'm awfully aware that of just how much more there is. Even if I don't really know much about it, I know that it's there. So I think there's still a lot of work to be done down there.
Yeah. Thanks, Peter. Yeah, I mean, the other thing that I'd like to say is that nearly all of the pictures that I think almost all of the pictures that I've shown are actually available on Flickr and at a reasonably high, large size, and that I'm quite happy for people who are doing entirely non-commercial things to actually use any of those pictures. So as long as it's entirely non-commercial, you know, if you're going to make money out of it, I think
just
I
look
want
for Peter Marshall on Flickr.
Yeah, there's about 20,000 of my pictures there, but
wow.
not all of this area.
Yeah.
But yeah, and more. There will be.
Oh, of course, yes. Before everybody joined, we had a little conversation because Peter has some pictures of Goole, which is my birthplace.
Oh yeah. Yes, they're on Flickr,
which I remember very well because that's where we went. My grandmother used to take me to what she called Hammonds's in Goole in Hull to see Father Christmas when I was about 4. Yeah.
Yeah, it's gone now.
That's it? Okay. I haven't been to Hull for a long, long time.
Well, it became something else.
Yeah. House of Fraser, probably.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Any more questions? Anybody else like to jump in and unmute themselves and ask a question or make a point? We are 7 minutes to 9. So thank you. If there are no more questions, I will say going, gone and say, Peter, thank you very much indeed. Mary.
Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Mary, would you like to have a quick word while people are on? Because we've got almost everyone is here about what we've got coming up next.
Very quick. On the 19th, we have Elizabeth Wiggins talking about Morden College's archive and her work there. She was archivist there. I don't know how many years, but many, many. And after that, we have a gap. But in September, we have Bill Burns and Stuart Ash coming back to talk about, it's something long about Pender, the title, but it's basically Pender's work on cable and wireless in Greenwich. And as I said, I wanted to push the Glass Journal, which has just come out today, which has in it this article about a foundry, which by Bob Carr, which was he worked out was actually on Ballast Quay, and I think we should reread it. And also my very long article about Deptford Creek to Ballast Quay as part of the series, which I'm about to finish Deptford. And Peter, I hope you've taken some pictures from Deptford. I'm going to have them for a book.
Well, you can have a look and see.
Oh, you've got yours. I haven't got my copy yet.
I've got my copy, yes. Yeah, I've had a quick read of your article, Mary, very interesting. And I didn't find too many things that showed that what I was saying was wrong.
No.
This program is brought to you by Glass Journal, Glass Publishing Limited.
Absolutely.
I really, really want to push that little short article, Bob, though, because it's such a find. And people go on about Royal Greenwich and blah, and it's actually got into the foundry, which nobody's noticed in all the posh pictures.
Yeah.
Good. Any final questions or points or observations from anybody? This, as soon as it takes a long time because I'm very busy and I've got a full-time job, but this is being recorded. I will eventually put it on our YouTube channel where you can see it. There's a lot of stuff already there. You just go to YouTube and search for Greenwich Industrial History, and you can see stuff back 2 years, nearly all our online stuff. And I'm gradually adding more things as I get time to do it. But for 1 hour, 1.5 hour talk, it probably takes about 4 or 5 hours to process it and then render it and then upload it. So it basically is a full evening's work, and I just have to have full evenings. So anyway, thank you very much indeed. It will be there. Peter, thank you very much for your really great pictures. I loved it. It felt so nostalgic because, I just know that route so well because I go down it so often. So this has been fantastic. Thank you very much indeed. Beautiful pictures.
Thank you.
And I will look you up on the publishing site, Blurb. I will look you up on Blurb.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, look me up on Flickr because that's free.
Okay, I will. But it's nice to have things. I have a whole bunch whole bunch of books on the side there.
Yeah.
And I just like collecting books. And I've got some of Mary's there as well.
Oh, yeah, so have I. Yes.
Yep. Okay, everybody. Thank you very much.
Right.
Enjoy the rest of your evening, everybody. Thank you. Bye-bye.